The champagne flute slipped from my fingers and shattered against the kitchen tile, sending crystal shards across the floor like tiny daggers. The sound, sharp and final, echoed in the otherwise pristine silence of my mother-in-law's opulent kitchen. "Oh my," Vivian said, not moving a muscle to help as I crouched down to collect the pieces. Her voice, smooth as silk and cold as ice, drifted over me. "Pregnancy makes us all so clumsy, doesn't it though? I suppose there's plenty of time to admit things before the baby comes." Her gaze, usually so composed, held a hint of malicious triumph, a subtle glint that sent a shiver down my spine, even in the warmth of the sun-drenched room. "My name is Iris Thorne, and I was 31 years old, 7 months pregnant, and at that exact moment, I knew my baby shower was going to be an unmitigated disaster. Every woman in the room, from the perfectly coiffed socialites to the perfectly Botox matriarchs, seemed to hold their breath, their eyes, sharp and judgmental, fixed on me. They were all members of Vivian's carefully curated inner circle. Women who knew the unspoken rules, the subtle digs, the silent judgments that permeated the air whenever Vivian Hayes was in command. I was a software engineer, not a socialite. I built complex algorithms, not social facades. I thrived in the logical, predictable world of code, where problems had clear solutions and inputs yielded predictable outputs. And I was about to find out that the world of old money, with its glittering chandeliers, its whispered alliances, and its unspoken rules, was far more treacherous than any line of malicious code I had ever encountered. "What do you mean by that?" I asked, still on my hands and knees, blood beading where a shard had nicked my palm. The tiny cut felt like a gaping wound, a symbol of the deeper cuts Vivian was so adept at inflicting. I tried to keep my voice steady, but a tremor, born of fear and indignation, ran through it. My mind raced, trying to decipher the layers of insinuation in her seemingly innocuous words. She was an expert at verbal camouflage, at delivering a devastating blow wrapped in a veneer of polite concern. Vivian smoothed her perfectly styled silver hair, a helmet of expensive highlights, and adjusted the pearl necklace that probably cost more than my entire apartment building back when I lived in Brooklyn. Her smile was a thin, predatory line, a shark's grin. "Oh, nothing specific, dear. Just that pregnancy has a way of bringing out the truth in people, eventually." The way she said eventually made my skin crawl. It wasn't a question. It was a veiled threat, an insinuation that hung in the air, heavy with unspoken accusations. People talk, you know. They wonder about timing, about circumstances. Especially when a family's legacy is at stake, and certain expectations are not met. Before I could respond, my best friend, Solstice Chen, burst through the kitchen door, carrying an armload of pink and gold balloons, her usually cheerful face a mask of confusion. Solstice was a force of nature, a brilliant data analyst I'd met in college, whose loyalty was as fierce as her intellect. She was oblivious to the subtle war being waged in the kitchen, her eyes sparkling with the innocent joy of the occasion. She wore a bright yellow dress, a defiant splash of color in Vivian's muted, elegant world. "Iris, the caterers are setting up the dessert bar, and guess what? They have those miniature cheesecakes you love, and the balloon arch is almost done. It looks phenomenal." I managed a weak smile, grateful for the interruption, for the sudden blast of innocent normalcy that momentarily diffused the tension. "Great, Solstice. Just dealing with a small breakage here." I nodded towards the glittering shards on the floor. Vivian's gaze flickered to Solstice, then back to me, her smile tightening. The thin veneer of civility stretched taut. Solstice, sensing the sudden shift, frowned slightly, her keen analytical mind already beginning to process the unspoken cues in the room. But the moment passed, and Vivian, with a dismissive wave of her hand, turned her attention to the incoming caterers, the quiet hum of the silver chafing dishes filling the air. The chill, however, lingered. I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that Vivian was implying something about my pregnancy, about its legitimacy, about its timing, about its very existence in the sacred lineage of the Hayes family. Something that would undermine not just me, but the entire future of my marriage to her son, Braxton, and the legitimacy of our unborn child. My life before Braxton was a whirlwind of algorithms, late-night coding sessions, and the quiet satisfaction of building something from nothing. I grew up in a working-class neighborhood in Queens, New York. My parents were immigrants, tirelessly working to provide a better life for me and my younger brother Leo. My father, a taxi driver, and my mother, a seamstress who worked 70 hours a week, instilled in me the value of hard work, perseverance, and education. Our small apartment was filled with the scent of spices and freshly laundered clothes, a stark contrast to the sprawling mansions of Boston's elite. I fell in love with computers in a public library, fascinated by how lines of text could create complex worlds, how logic could solve any problem, how a few lines of code could unlock vast new possibilities. I excelled in math and science, earning a scholarship to NYU, where I majored in computer science. My professors often told me I had an innate gift for identifying patterns and vulnerabilities, a rare talent for seeing the hidden architecture beneath the surface. I was 29 when I met Braxton. He was a corporate lawyer, dashing and charismatic, with a quiet strength that balanced my intense analytical mind. He hailed from Boston, a world away from my Queens upbringing, but our connection was undeniable, a spark that ignited a whirlwind romance. We met at a tech conference in San Francisco, an unlikely pairing, a coder and a litigator. But our connection was undeniable, a spark that ignited a whirlwind romance. He was fascinated by my work at Nexus Systems, a startup I co-founded that developed secure communication protocols for high-stakes financial transactions and encrypted data storage for sensitive government data. I was drawn to his wit, his genuine kindness, and the way he looked at me, not as a brilliant engineer, but simply as Iris. He saw beyond my intellect, to the quiet humor and resilience I rarely showed to the outside world. Our relationship progressed quickly, a blur of romantic dinners in exclusive restaurants, weekend getaways to charming coastal towns, and deep conversations that stretched late into the night, exploring everything from global politics to the existential mysteries of the universe. Braxton was the first man who truly saw me, who celebrated my intellect as much as he cherished my heart. He spoke of a future with me, a future filled with shared dreams, a comfortable life, and a family. A future that, I now realized, was built on a foundation of sand, constantly threatened by the unforgiving tides of his mother's disapproval. Vivian Hayes was the undisputed matriarch of the Hayes family, a name synonymous with old money, impeccable philanthropy, and unshakable influence in Boston society. Her family had made their fortune in shipping and textiles generations ago, a legacy she guarded with the ferocity of a dragon protecting its hoard of gold and reputation. She was a woman of impeccable taste, chilling elegance, and a rigid adherence to tradition and perceived social standing. Every line on her face, every perfectly chosen accessory, bespoke a life of effortless privilege and absolute control. From the moment Braxton introduced us, I felt her disdain, a cold, sharp assessment that deemed me a self-made tech professional from a humble background, utterly unsuitable for her precious son, the sole heir to the Hayes legacy. She saw my ambition as aggressive, my independence as insolence, my working-class roots as a stain on their pristine lineage. She saw me as an outsider, a threat to their carefully constructed world, a wrench in her meticulously laid plans for Braxton's future. Our wedding, a grand affair in a historic Boston estate that dated back to the Revolutionary War, had been a constant battleground. Vivian had subtly, then overtly, tried to dictate every detail from the guest list. We simply must invite the Tremonts, dear. They're practically family, to my gown. Are you sure that simple design truly reflects the grandeur of the Hayes name? I pushed back, gently but firmly, asserting my wishes, trying to build a bridge, to find a compromise. I wanted our day to reflect us, not just her societal expectations. Braxton, torn between his deep love for me and his lifelong deference to his formidable mother, often played the role of mediator, though more often than not, he simply enabled Vivian's subtle manipulations, pleading with me to just let it go, for peace. His attempts to smooth things over often felt like excuses for his mother's appalling behavior. A wound that festered, unaddressed. A silent testament to the fragile state of our marital foundation. The wedding was beautiful, but the undercurrent of tension was undeniable. It felt less like a celebration of our love, and more like a public declaration of war. A skirmish in Vivian's ongoing campaign to undermine me. Then came the pregnancy. It was unplanned, a joyful surprise that initially brought Braxton and me even closer. We were ecstatic, dreaming of nurseries and baby names, momentarily insulated from the outside world by a bubble of shared happiness. We spent hours poring over baby books, picking out tiny clothes, fantasizing about their first steps, their first words. But the news was met with a chilling silence from Vivian. No congratulations, no excitement. Only a thinly veiled interrogation about the timing, about how sudden it all was, about whether this was a strategic decision. It was clear she suspected something that would tarnish the pristine Hayes name. She began to subtly, but relentlessly, spread rumors, whisper insinuations about my past, about unforeseen complications that might have hastened the marriage, about my ambition overshadowing natural maternal instincts. Each coded remark was a precise, calculated strike designed to cast doubt, to shame, to isolate me, to delegitimize my pregnancy and, by extension, my entire relationship with Braxton. She even hinted to mutual acquaintances that I might be using Braxton for his family's wealth, that the baby was a calculated move to secure my place in the Hayes dynasty. My pregnancy had been tough. First trimester morning sickness had been relentless, turning every scent, every taste into a nauseating ordeal. Then came the exhaustion, the aches, the emotional roller coaster that left me feeling fragile and vulnerable. Braxton, bless his heart, tried to be supportive, bringing me ginger ale and rubbing my aching back, but his demanding work as a busy corporate lawyer often took him away on overnight trips, leaving me alone in our vast, quiet house, grappling with my discomfort and Vivian's increasingly vicious attacks. I found solace in my work, pouring my energy into a complex new cybersecurity project at Nexus Systems, a cutting-edge AI-driven defense system for government agencies. My focus on that project, my meticulous attention to detail, became my refuge. A way to channel my anxieties and prove my worth, not to Vivian, but to myself, to the world, and to the unwavering logic of code. It was a tangible way to assert my control in a life that felt increasingly out of my hands. The baby shower, hosted by Vivian at her sprawling estate, was designed to be a grand affair, a public display of family unity and Hayes generosity. But it felt more like a public inquisition, a theatrical performance staged for Vivian's social circle. The room was filled with women I barely knew, all clad in designer dresses and glittering jewelry, their laughter brittle, their eyes assessing, judging, evaluating. I felt like an exhibit, my pregnant belly a target for whispered judgments, my every move scrutinized. The air hummed with unspoken expectations, with the weight of generations of Hayes tradition. After the shattered champagne glass incident, the tension in the kitchen became palpable, as thick as the silence that had followed Vivian's chilling words. Vivian, with a theatrical sigh that drew every eye, had changed the subject to the baby's nursery, a room she had insisted on decorating herself, in shades of muted gray and beige, utterly devoid of warmth or personality. It felt like a prison cell, a place where a child's spirit would be dulled, not nourished, a sterile environment designed to reflect her own cold, rigid control. She gestured to a large, ornate gift box, wrapped in silver paper and tied with a stiff white bow. And of course, for the nursery, the priceless Hayes family heirloom rocking horse. Generations of Hayes children have ridden it. Her tone implied that my child, by some miracle, was being allowed to partake in this sacred tradition, a grudging concession rather than a loving gift. It's lovely, Vivian, I said, forcing a smile that felt like a contortion. My mind, however, was miles away, replaying her earlier comments, the biting sarcasm, the veiled threats. I knew I couldn't endure another moment of her insidious manipulation, her quiet cruelty. I had to address this, not just for myself, who had endured enough, but for my child, who deserved to be born into a family free from such insidious malice, a child who deserved to feel truly loved and legitimate. I knew Vivian would not stop, that her campaign of character assassination would only intensify once the baby arrived. She would find new ways to chip away at my self-worth, new avenues to spread her poison. I had to fight back, and I had to do it now, definitively, publicly, where her entire social facade could be shattered. A plan, cold and precise as one of my algorithms, began to form in my mind. It was risky, it was audacious, but it was the only way to expose Vivian's true nature and silence her once and for all. I had spent months feeling helpless, caught in her web of manipulation, struggling with the emotional toll of her attacks while my body was already under immense strain from the pregnancy. But I was Iris Thorne, a cybersecurity expert, a master of data, of uncovering hidden truths, and Vivian, in her arrogance, in her unwavering belief in her own untouchable power, had left a trail. My secret weapon wasn't a piece of cutting-edge software or a hidden backdoor into a network. It was a file, a very old, very sensitive file, that I had stumbled upon quite by accident months ago while helping Braxton digitize some of his family's aging legal documents for a complex trust fund review. He had a vast collection of dusty old papers, boxes filled with decades of Hayes family history, some dating back to the turn of the century. It was an old legal affidavit buried deep within a stack of brittle papers marked Miscellaneous Hayes Estate, 1993. At first, I dismissed it as irrelevant probate documents, tedious and dry. But then a specific name, a specific date, caught my eye, triggering that familiar flicker of professional curiosity. It contained information that Vivian had meticulously, ruthlessly kept hidden for decades. Information that, if revealed, would utterly destroy her carefully constructed image, exposing her not as the elegant matriarch she so desperately pretended to be, but as a deceitful, manipulative schemer who had built her current standing on a foundation of lies, theft, and profound betrayal. This document was the key to her past, a past she had painstakingly erased from public record. I had meticulously copied and digitized the file, running it through several forensic analysis programs to verify its authenticity, then encrypting it with a triple-layered security protocol, the kind of encryption I usually reserved for top-secret government data. Then, I had stored it on an encrypted drive in a secure, undisclosed location. A digital dead man's switch. My instincts, the same instincts that led me to discover vulnerabilities in multi-billion-dollar systems, told me this document was a contingency, a desperate, last-resort defense. I had hoped I would never have to use it, that Vivian's cruelty would eventually relent, or that Braxton would finally stand up to her. But now, as Vivian's poisonous words echoed in the lavish kitchen, and her eyes continued to bore into me with thinly veiled contempt, I knew the time had come. The baby deserved a grandmother who was truly kind, not one who built empires on deceit. And I deserved peace. The baby shower continued, a blur of polite conversation and forced smiles. I moved through the room like a ghost, shaking hands, accepting gifts, all the while my mind racing, constructing the perfect sequence of events, planning the precise moment to deliver the coup de grâce. I needed a public forum, a moment where all eyes would be on me, where Vivian would be at her most confident and vulnerable, basking in the illusion of her own impeccable reputation. The moment came during the gift opening ceremony. Vivian, beaming, sat beside me, ostentatiously reading out the names of prominent guests and their extravagant gifts: a diamond-studded pacifier from the DuPonts, a hand-stitched silk crib canopy from the Vanderbilts, each item a silent testament to her social influence. She loved the spotlight, reveled in being the center of attention, the gracious hostess, the benevolent matriarch. This was her stage, and I was about to usurp it, to tear down the elaborate scenery she had constructed. And now, for the grand finale, Vivian announced, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness, yet laced with an undeniable undercurrent of self-satisfaction, the family's traditional baby gift. A truly priceless heirloom. She gestured to a small, exquisitely wrapped box, placed prominently on the gift table, near the towering, multi-tiered cake adorned with sugar-spun angels and tiny golden booties. It was a family tradition for the patriarch, or in this case, the matriarch, to present a piece of antique jewelry to the newest member of the Hayes lineage. This was her ultimate symbol of acceptance, or, in my case, a public spectacle of grudging acknowledgement, a final, gilded chain she hoped to shackle me with. I smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that didn't reach my eyes, a silent promise of the storm to come. Thank you, Vivian. It's truly thoughtful. But before we open that, there's something else I'd like to share. A gift, if you will, for everyone here. A little piece of family history that I recently stumbled upon during a very thorough deep dive into the Hayes archives. My voice was calm, almost conversational, yet it carried an undeniable weight, a chilling undertone that made the room suddenly still. A ripple of surprise went through the crowd. Vivian's smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion, then a sudden, sharp stab of alarm. Her eyes, usually so composed, darted to me, a desperate flicker of suspicion crossing her face. Iris, darling, what are you talking about? This is a baby shower, not a history lesson. Her voice was sharp, a barely concealed warning, a desperate attempt to regain control. Oh, but it is, Vivian, I said, my voice gaining strength, resonating with a quiet authority that silenced the room, every whisper dying in the opulent air, because this history sheds light on exactly what kind of legacy this baby is truly inheriting. And it pertains directly to your beautiful family home, this very estate we stand in, which has always been the pride of the Hayes lineage. I reached into my small clutch bag, pulling out a sleek, thin tablet. It was not a presentation tablet. It was a secure device connected to a private cloud server that I controlled entirely. I had preloaded the digitized affidavit onto it, along with a secure anonymous link that would simultaneously email the document to every single guest on the event's digital invitation list I had subtly, unknowingly, been given access to by Braxton for baby shower updates. The room was utterly silent, every eye fixed on me, on the small device in my hand. Braxton, who had been chatting with a cousin across the room, now stood frozen, his eyes wide with confusion and a dawning apprehension, a silent plea for me to explain myself. You see, I continued, projecting my voice so every ear in the spacious, chandelier-lit living room could hear. When I married into this family, I made it my business to understand its foundations, its true roots. And sometimes, when you dig deep enough, you find things that were meant to stay buried. Secrets, crimes, things that have profoundly impacted countless lives. I activated the tablet, and a single, crystal-clear document appeared on the large, wall-mounted screen that had previously been displaying photos of smiling babies and pictures of the tastefully decorated nursery. It was the digitized image of the old, yellowed legal affidavit, its archaic font stark against the luminous screen. The date at the top, the 12th of September, 1993, was highlighted in stark, undeniable red. The title, in bold, damning letters, read, Affidavit of Fraudulent Conveyance and Concealment of Assets, Re High's Estate Division. A collective gasp swept through the room, quickly followed by a cacophony of shocked whispers. Vivian's face went utterly ashen, her carefully constructed composure disintegrating before my very eyes. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked like a cornered animal, stripped bare, exposed, her eyes darting around the room as if seeking an escape that wasn't there. This document, I explained, my voice calm and steady, unwavering, is a sworn affidavit from a former Hayes family estate attorney, a highly respected, now deceased, legal professional named Mr. Arthur Finch. It details, in excruciating detail, how, in 1993, following the untimely death of Vivian's older brother, Mr. Reginald Hayes, Vivian systematically and illegally diverted significant portions of the Hayes family inheritance, specifically assets tied to this very estate, this house, which was meant to be equally divided among all surviving heirs, including a previously unknown, illegitimate child of Reginald's, a young woman named Clara Maxwell, who was then a struggling single mother of 2 young children. Another wave of gasps, louder this time, rippled through the room. Clara Maxwell? An illegitimate child? This was explosive, the kind of scandal that could unravel generations of carefully cultivated reputation, a stain on the pristine Hayes legacy that would never wash clean. Mr. Finch, I continued, gesturing to the affidavit on the screen, states under oath that Vivian coerced him into falsifying records, concealing the existence of Clara Maxwell, and rerouting millions of dollars, funds that rightfully belonged to her brother's daughter, into her own private accounts. This house, the very foundation of the Hayes family legacy, the symbol of their prestige and philanthropic endeavors, was acquired using a significant portion of those fraudulently obtained funds, effectively stolen from an innocent, rightful heir. This isn't just an old family secret, ladies and gentlemen. This is a 25-year-old crime, a massive fraud that Vivian meticulously covered up to secure her own power, her own wealth, and her own unchallenged position at the top of Boston society. I paused, letting the full weight of my words sink in. The room was in an uproar, a cacophony of shocked whispers, exclamations of disbelief, and outright accusations. Women gasped, their hands flying to their mouths. Some pointed at Vivian, their faces twisted with disgust, their previously admiring expressions now contorted into masks of horror and judgment. The illusion of the perfect Hayes family, the untouchable matriarch, was shattering, piece by agonizing piece, before their very eyes. The silence that had once been so oppressive was now filled with the chaotic hum of a reputation imploding. Vivian, finally finding her voice, shrieked, a high-pitched, desperate sound that cut through the noise. "This is a lie! A malicious fabrication! Braxton, do something! This woman is insane! She's trying to ruin us! She's making it all up!" Her voice was shrill, desperate, a far cry from her usual composed, silken tones. She lunged for the tablet, her manicured hands outstretched, nails like claws, as if she could simply snatch the damning evidence and make it disappear, undo the last few devastating minutes. But I was quicker. I stepped back, holding the tablet out of her reach. "It's not a lie, Vivian. It's sworn testimony. a detailed account of your criminal actions, and the original notarized document, along with comprehensive bank records, property deeds, and other corroborating evidence Mr. Finch secretly compiled as his own insurance policy, is now in the hands of my legal team. They've been working quietly, thoroughly, for weeks to verify every single detail, every single transaction. I gave them explicit instructions to only act if and when I gave the word, a preset trigger. Today, Vivian, I gave the word. The truth finally has been unleashed. Braxton, his face a ghastly shade of white, finally stumbled forward, his eyes wide with a horrifying understanding. Iris, what is this? What have you done? His voice was filled with a mixture of horror and betrayal, but it was directed at me, at my actions, not at his mother's decades of deceit. The pain of that accusation, of his immediate assumption of my culpability, was a bitter sting, a final, searing wound. He still couldn't see past the facade, even when it was crumbling around him. "What have I done, Braxton?" I scoffed, a raw, sharp edge entering my voice, echoing with months of suppressed anger and hurt. "I have exposed the truth. The truth your mother so desperately tried to bury. The truth she used to build her empire, her reputation, her very life. The truth that affects our child's inheritance, our child's future, and the very foundation of the legacy you cling to. Your mother has been systematically lying, stealing, and manipulating for decades, all to secure her own power and wealth. And she was preparing to do it again, to me, to our baby. With her constant insinuations, her public shaming, her vile, baseless accusations about my character and our marriage, I turned back to the stunned crowd, my gaze sweeping across their faces, holding them captive, forcing them to witness the complete collapse of their revered matriarch. This is not just about old money or dusty family secrets. This is about a pattern of deceit, a legacy of manipulation, a profound abuse of power. My mother-in-law has made it her mission to humiliate me, to undermine my marriage, to cast doubt on the legitimacy of my unborn child, simply because I don't fit her narrow, antiquated definition of what a Hayes wife should be. She has spent months spreading malicious rumors, planting seeds of doubt, all to ensure I would be isolated, powerless, and utterly defenseless against her machinations. She sought to destroy me publicly, to break my spirit, to make me conform to her suffocating expectations, but I refused. My voice rose, filled with a righteous indignation that had been simmering for months, finally unleashed. She wanted to shame me into silence. She wanted me to disappear, to vanish into the shadows of her perfect world. But I am not disappearing. I am Iris Thorne. I am a software engineer. I build secure systems. I uncover hidden truths. And I will not allow anyone, least of all a woman who has built her life on a foundation of lies and stolen inheritance, to dictate my worth or the worth of my child. My daughter will be born into a family built on truth, not on a gilded cage of lies. I looked directly at Vivian, whose face was now utterly contorted with a mixture of impotent rage and profound terror. Her eyes, once so sharp and calculating, were now wide, filled with a desperate, animalistic fear. "You wanted to show everyone the truth today, Vivian? Very well. Here it is. The truth about you, the truth about the Hayes legacy, and the truth about the woman you tried so desperately to break." At that exact, exquisitely timed moment, the sound of official, authoritative voices filled the opulent living room. Federal agents, their faces grim and professional, moved swiftly through the stunned crowd, their badges glinting under the crystal chandeliers. Their presence had been orchestrated by Lena Petrova and my legal team, notified the moment I triggered a preset digital release of the authenticated affidavit and all supporting evidence. Vivian shrieked again, a raw, primal sound, but her voice was quickly muffled as agents took her by the arms. "This is an outrage. I am Vivian Hayes. You can't do this. This is my house. You'll regret this." "Mrs. Hayes," one of the agents said, his voice firm, unwavering, "you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, grand larceny, and obstruction of justice, dating back to 1993. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As they escorted her out, her elegant facade utterly shattered, her perfectly styled silver hair now disheveled, her expensive pearls askew, the crowd parted like the Red Sea. Whispers followed her, not of admiration, but of disgust and shocked disbelief. The very people who had once hung on her every word, who had envied her perfect life, now recoiled from her disgraced form, their faces a mixture of judgment and relief. The image of the grand matriarch, the unblemished pillar of Boston society, was irrevocably shattered, crumbled into dust. Braxton stood there, utterly numb, caught between the wreckage of his mother's exposed lies and the raw, undeniable strength of his wife. His family, his legacy, his entire world had just imploded, revealed as nothing but a hollow sham. He slowly turned to me, his eyes filled with a pain that finally mirrored my own, but also with a dawning realization, a profound understanding of the depths of his mother's deception and my unwavering fight for truth. He had enabled her for too long, blind to her true nature, complicit in his silence. The aftermath was a whirlwind. The story exploded across every major news outlet, a scandal that rocked Boston's elite to its core. "Boston matriarch arrested at granddaughter's baby shower for decades-old fraud," the headline screamed. The Hayes name, once synonymous with old money and philanthropy, was now forever linked to scandal, criminal charges, and a profound betrayal. The Hayes estate, including the mansion where the baby shower had been held, was immediately frozen, pending investigations into the misappropriated funds and assets. Countless charities and organizations that had accepted large donations from Vivian Hayes began launching internal investigations, fearing their own reputations would be tarnished by association. Braxton, reeling from the shock, initially struggled to come to terms with the devastating truth about his mother. It was a profound blow, a betrayal that shattered his perception of his family, his childhood, everything he had believed in. He was a lawyer, a man who believed in justice, and his mother had systematically undermined everything he stood for. But to his credit, he didn't turn away. He sought counseling, grappling with the trauma of his mother's deceit and his own unwitting complicity in benefiting from her crimes. He began to see the true cost of his lifelong deference to Vivian, the corrosive damage her manipulations had caused, not just to me, but to his own sense of self, his own integrity. He worked tirelessly with my legal team, providing every piece of information he could, openly cooperating with federal investigators, desperate to make amends and to rebuild his life, and our marriage, on a foundation of honesty and integrity. He understood, finally, that his silence had been a form of complicity. My decision to expose Vivian was agonizing, a choice that tore at my soul. It was a public burning, a painful severing of ties that had once been cherished, however flawed. But it was a necessary one. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about truth, justice, and protecting my child from the insidious poison of lies and manipulation. It was about reclaiming my narrative, defining my worth, and setting a precedent for the life my child would lead, a life built on honesty and courage, not on the fragile foundations of deceit and inherited privilege. I realized that my own peace, my own freedom, depended on it. Years later, my daughter, Aurora Hayes, is a vibrant, fiercely intelligent child, growing up in a home filled with love, laughter, and an unwavering commitment to truth. She knows about the past, told to her not as a dark secret, but as a cautionary tale of a family's journey through trials and tribulations, of a mother's strength, and of the enduring power of honesty. She understands that true legacy is not about inherited wealth or fleeting social standing, but about character, integrity, and the courage to stand up for what is right, no matter the cost. My career at Nexus Systems has soared to new heights. The incident, while painful, cemented my reputation as a formidable leader, a woman of unyielding integrity who would stop at nothing to protect her principles. I now lead a specialized division focused on ethical AI and digital forensics, helping other victims of sophisticated fraud and manipulation, often in the corporate world. My work is not just about algorithms or lines of code. It's about justice, about fighting for those who cannot fight for themselves, about wielding the power of information for good. Braxton and I, after intense couples counseling and a profound period of rebuilding trust, have found a stronger, more authentic love. Our marriage is no longer overshadowed by his mother's toxic influence or his past deference. He has become a true partner, a man who stands by me, who celebrates my strength, and who actively works to create a family environment built on mutual respect and unwavering honesty. He knows now that true strength isn't about controlling others or maintaining appearances, but about supporting those you love and facing uncomfortable truths head-on, even when those truths shatter your own world. My story isn't just about exposing a deceitful mother-in-law or protecting a future inheritance. It's about the profound act of self-preservation, about reclaiming your voice, your worth, and your identity in the face of profound personal and systemic challenges. It's about understanding that sometimes the greatest act of love is the painful decision to cut out the rot, to expose the darkness, so that true light can finally shine. It's about realizing that true freedom isn't given. It is fiercely, bravely, undeniably taken. And for every woman out there who has been shamed, undermined, or made to feel less than, remember this: your truth is your most powerful weapon. Use it. Wield it with courage. Because when you do, you don't just liberate yourself, you illuminate the path for others, proving that integrity, courage, and an unwavering belief in your own worth are the most powerful legacies you can ever build. The quiet strength I found in myself, the strength that enabled me to confront years of manipulation and public humiliation, has become my guiding star. I am no longer defined by what others perceive me to be, but by the undeniable truth of who I am. A woman who built her own path, protected her own family, and, in doing so, forged a legacy far more valuable than any inherited fortune.